Hi there and welcome. This is Jenna from McGuire. Today I wanted to share with you how I like to do color layering or stamp layering on dark color cardstocks. I've done a variation of this in the past, but I thought I'd share it again because the technique is very effective. So you'll see I have two cards to share. One's on white cardstock and one is on a dark kraft cardstock, yet I use the same inks on both. I'm really excited to use the Gina Designs Layered Lilies stamp set. This is a large one with a large lily image. You can layer up images, you can stamp the outline, or use them separately. I also like that this set includes lots of details that you can add, which I'll show you in this video, and also that the leaves have several layers to them too. I have two pieces of cardstock today, Nina white cardstock and Ranger kraft cardstock. They're both cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm using my MISTI today to save time and effort, but you can use an acrylic block if that's all you have. I'm going to start by preparing my Ranger kraft cardstock so that I can stamp with colorful dye inks on it. To do this, I first stamp the most solid layer with white pigment ink. I prefer to use Hero Arts Unicorn White ink, but you can use some other pigment inks if that's all you have. Now my ink pad is good and juicy. If yours is dry, you might want to stamp it twice to really get a good layer of white. You'll also want to make sure that this is completely heat set and dry before moving on to the next steps. So you just want to make sure it's dry to the touch. Now I did decide I wanted to double up and make this even brighter white, so I'm stamping it a second time, but you do not need to do this. I just wanted to show you that by double stamping it, you can really make it an intense white. I did a few cards with only one layer of white and they turned out just fine. But again, you want to make sure you heat set this completely. If it is a little sticky to the touch but dry, you can just rub an anti-static powder tool over it to remove some of that stick. But again, make sure it's dry before you do that. So now that my kraft cardstock is ready with the base layer of white ink, we can do our dye ink stamping on both the white and the kraft. So I'm going to do the same thing on both cards. I'm starting with that bottom solid image first, and I'm stamping this with a shell pink ink from W+9. This is a great soft pink color. I stamped it on the white, and again, I'm going to stamp it on the kraft cardstock directly on top of the white. It will look a little bit splotchy because it's wet. That dye ink doesn't really want to absorb into that pigment ink, but if you heat set it, you'll be fine. Okay, so now it's time for this second layer. So I'm going to grab that image from the stamp set and line it up with the bottom layer, and this is very easy to line up since it's a pretty solid image. Next, I'm using one of my all-time favorite color inks. This is the Gina Designs Peach Bellini, and I'm going to stamp this on the white and on the kraft. So basically, I'm doing the same stamping on the white paper and the kraft paper, but with the kraft paper, I started with that white layer of pigment ink first. If I didn't do that white layer of pigment ink, these colorful dye inks would just kind of stamp onto the kraft and lose its color. By doing the white first, it gives it a base for that color to sit on. You just want to make sure you heat set it as you go. Now for the next layer, I am using Gina Designs Tomato Soup. This is a great dark peach color that goes nice with that peach bellini. And I'm stamping it on the white and on the kraft. Now this kraft looks kind of muted and lost right now, those stamped images do on the kraft, but once you get to the darker, more vibrant colors, it really starts to stand out. Now this image is one of my favorite things about this stamp set. It has these little details. These are the little dots that are in the lily petals, and I like that it adds a lot of detail to that image. A lot of times I add those details myself with a little tip of a pen or with a stylus and ink, but this stamp set comes with those details. Now for the center, I first stamped this with faded brick ink, like a dark kind of peach color, dark red, but I thought that kind of got lost, so I went ahead and stamped it again with charcoal brown. It's okay to change your mind and go to a darker color if you want to. I'm going to do the same on the kraft, and you can see how that really starts to glow on the kraft paper. I really like how those peach colors look different on the kraft cardstock. Okay, so now it's time to do the leaves, and if you look closely, those leaves are kind of tucked behind the flower, so we're going to have to mask off our flower. To do this, I stamped the base image of the flower onto a Post-it note. And these are Post-it notes where the whole back of it is sticky. I actually pulled off 5 of the Post-it notes, and I'm going to cut through all 5 layers at once. I like to cut extra masks like this so that I can be sure it doesn't bleed through one layer, and I have extras for other projects. So here I'm taking 2 layers of the mask and placing it over the flower. Again, I'm using 2 layers so that my ink doesn't bleed through the mask and mess up my flower. So I have the hello stamp there just to block off where that will be, but I'm not actually going to stamp it now. I'm just stamping the 2 base layers of the leaves. These are the leaves here in the layered lily stamp set. I like that they have the outline and 3 layers to add colors to the leaves, which a lot of layering stamp sets only offer a couple. This is the Jelly Bean Green from Gina Designs. I'm going to stamp this down onto the white cardstock, and then I will do the same on the kraft. And since I cut extra masks, I can use a different mask for this one. Now you could do this stamp layering on kraft by just using pigment ink. Since pigment ink is opaque, it kind of sits on top of the paper. You could also use Distress Oxide ink, but I know many people don't have those type of inks. They only have dye. So I wanted to be able to show you that by stamping first with the white pigment ink, you can add dye on top of it. Okay, so on the kraft, I did the white first, and now I can go ahead and do my green stamping on top of that. Again, always heat set that between each step because you don't want that ink to smear. Okay, so now I can go add the 2nd and 3rd layers to these leaves. Now keep in mind in this stamp set, there are outline images that you could stamp on top of these to really add more definition. I decided not to use them on today's cards, but there is that option, which I think is nice to have. Also, if the outline image is included on the stamp set, you could use the outline to do basic watercoloring or coloring and skip the layering images. It's good to have both options. So I'm going to continue to add the other layers on the leaves using darker shades of green ink. Now I used kraft cardstock for this technique. It's a Ranger kraft cardstock, which is a darker kraft, and I really like it. However, you could do this technique on any dark or colored cardstock. So say you wanted to have a blue background with a yellow flower. You could do blue cardstock, stamp with white pigment ink, and then stamp your yellow inks on top of that. You could even do this technique on black cardstock. But remember, this isn't going to give you a true vibrant image like it would on white. This is a little bit of a different technique that gives you kind of a soft color that has a bit of glow to it because that white glows on the kraft. So now it's time to finish up these 2 cards. I am going to stamp an image from a new fabulous stamp set from Simon Says Stamp designed by czdesign, and this is called Hello You. I am in love with that beautiful hello image, and there are lots of little sentiments to put underneath it. On the kraft, I'm going to stamp the hello with Versamark ink and white heat emboss it. On the white cardstock, I gold heat embossed it. And on both of them, I stamped Birthday Girl underneath it with the tomato soup ink. So on the kraft, the tomato soup ink kind of absorbs into the paper and gets soft, but that's kind of the look I was going for. If I wanted this to stand out more, I could have first stamped with white pigment ink and then done the tomato soup on top, or I could have just white heat embossed it. But I wanted to show you what the dye ink looks like stamped on the kraft alone. Okay, so there are a few finishing touches that I did to these cards. One is I wanted some gold heat embossing at the center of the flower. To add touches of embossing powder, you can either use a Versamark pen, or you can use a quickie glue pen like I did here. I just did a little bit of quickie glue pen towards the center, added some gold embossing powder, and heat set it. And it gives us that nice gold touch in the center of the flower. Now I trimmed these panels down a little bit and glued them onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card. I wanted to have a few little embellishments, so I used drops of Tonic Nuvo Jewel drops in the rose color. This is a transparent drop that has a tint of pink, and it's not too distracting from the image. I did stamp my envelopes with this Gina Designs stamp set that is fantastic for stamping on envelopes. Can't recommend it enough. I've been using it a lot lately, and it really ties everything together with that beautiful peach color. Now I use those rose drops also on the craft, and you can see how it adds just a little touch of rose and a little bit of dimension. And you can see the highlights that you get with that flower on the craft cardstock because we have the white pigment ink underneath. And here is the two versions next to each other. So you can see how the colors are slightly different, but both give great results. Okay, so if you are interested in any of these products that I talk about, they are linked below in my YouTube description. Over on my blog, I have much more information for you. I hope you'll give this technique a try. In the middle are 2 other videos that might be of interest to you. I hope you come back soon and have a great day.